and welcome to EconVersations. I'm your host, Dr. Dan Sutter with the Johnson Center for Political Economy at Troy University. The ride-sharing company Uber allows people to arrange rides with others and who have cars and are willing to drive. And it stands at the forefront of what's been dubbed the sharing economy. And the company has been making news headlines across Alabama, the nation, and even the world. How can a company that seeks to make our world a better place and is in an effort of trying to improve our lives generate so much controversy? Joining me on EconVersations today are Dr. Dan Smith of the Johnson Center for Political Economy and Troy University student Olivia Melton. And together they've recently co-authored an opinion column on Uber for the Birmingham Business Journal. Dan, welcome back to the show. And Olivia, welcome to EconVersations.
Thank you for having us.
Well, why don't we just start by telling our viewers and reminding us what exactly is Uber and what are they involved in?
Yeah, so Dan, Uber and Lyft are both ride-sharing apps that you download onto your smartphone, and you use it to share a ride with someone in their personal vehicle. And it offers a lower cost and more flexible transportation service than traditional taxi cabs or something really unreliable like public transportation like buses. So Uber is just an app that you use to share a ride with someone in their personal vehicle.
And so the people who would be like Uber drivers, who hear that term sometime, they're just ordinary folks?
Yeah, so these can be individuals that are stay-at-home moms to teachers to anyone that has access to a car and a driver's license.
That sounds pretty interesting and amazing. Now, actually, as we mentioned, Dan, as you mentioned earlier, there are a number of other companies that are providing similar services. One is Lyft, but tell us a little bit about some of these other companies that are providing similar type services.
Yeah, so some of these other companies that are providing services are like Airbnb, which is actually you can rent out an entire house or just a room in a house to someone that's coming into that area. So if you're a professor and you work in Washington, D.C., and you take off for the summers to live down in Florida, you can actually rent out your apartment or house during the summer to someone that is traveling there for an internship, for instance. So it's a great opportunity to share resources that people aren't using, that they own, but currently aren't using in a safe and reliable manner.
And that, I guess, is where the term sharing economy is coming from, right? We're actually sort of making use of other people's resources in that fashion, right?
Right, so this is something that's really interesting. This is something that a lot of people see in their daily lives. I used Airbnb this summer when I was on an internship. So it's something that's very prevalent and something that a lot of people are now starting to really see the benefits of.
And this creates value by getting resources from somebody who's not currently using them to somebody who wants to use them?
Right, so the idea is that, again, you have something in your possession that you're not using to its full extent, and that you are allowing someone else to use it during that time.
Well, it sounds like there'd probably be a lot of other applications of this principle of sharing things that we have that we're not currently using, right?
Yeah, you can even extend it. You could see it, especially in natural disasters, to something like a power generator. Many of us have generators in our garage and we never use them, but maybe half hour away, someone could actually use that in the event of a tornado, for instance. So you can see it extended to a wide array of resources and get wider use of those resources and help people out and bring people together that previously probably would have never never have interacted before.
Well, I have a generator that's collecting dust in my garage, so I might have to check into that at some point in time here. Now, so tell us a little bit more, because I've never used the service, and I'm sure probably a number of our viewers haven't used it either. Tell us a little bit more exactly how this works.
Right, so it starts with an app that you can download on any smartphone, and whenever you are wanting a ride, you just request a ride. And the app will actually tell you how far away the closest Uber driver is, and you can watch them come to you, to your location. It gives you all their driver's information, phone number if you need to call them for any reason, and that's how the ride begins.
And how do you agree on a price that they're going to charge?
So Uber sets out the prices for the individuals, and it will tell you before you request a ride. It will tell you the exact rate that's going on right now. And they also have prices or times when prices can be higher, which is called surging.
Okay, so like if on like New Year's Eve, I think I remember reading like they were having particularly high rates on New Year's Eve, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And what's really interesting on the Uber model is on the driver's side, anyone can be an Uber driver that has access to a license and meets their requirements. So as the price increases, showing that there's more demand for rides, more people are willing to become drivers and take their personal automobile out and go pick up riders. So eventually that high price will encourage more supply of Uber drivers.
Now, this seems a little frightening to me, the idea that like some random person is going to come up with their car and you're going to get in their car and take a ride with them. And it sounds like it could be pretty dangerous. I mean, you don't know, is this person a good driver? Do they even have a driver's license? Are they going to get in an accident and kill you or whatever? So how does that aspect of it work?
That was definitely something when I first started using Uber in the DC area that I was wary of. But then I looked into it more. They actually do background checks on all their Uber drivers and require them to have their license and insurance on file, and a certain model of car that's required up to a certain year. So you know that you're getting a good ride. As well. And when you request a ride, at the end of it, you will actually rate your Uber driver out of 5 stars, and that driver will also rate you as a rider.
Really? So, and for instance, then when you're requesting an Uber driver, can you see these ratings of the various drivers that are out there?
You can, and that's one of the reasons why Uber is actually, I feel, a little more safer than taxi drivers. You get in with a taxi and you're not sure what this record is, who this person is, but as soon as you have the Uber driver and they're coming to you, and again, you can cancel it at any time before they get to you, you have their ratings, their information, their cell phone number, everything you need to know to make your decision.
And then Uber sort of stands behind everything that's going on here, that if you have a disagreement or anything, can you turn to Uber to help with that? Or?
Yeah, absolutely. So Uber guarantees a standard of quality, and if there's a problem, you get the chance to write a complaint or reflect it in the reviews that you give that driver. And Uber will respond to that. If a driver receives an average rating below their threshold, they will actually let that driver go. Or if there's any huge problems that any rider shares with them, Uber will automatically suspend that driver and not let them return. And it also provides safety for the driver as well. I personally, one of the first times I used Uber was out in Orange Beach, California, right outside of LA. I was getting a ride at 4 a.m. It's dark outside, and I realized I just got an Uber driver to come pick me up, but he has no idea who I am. It's dark outside, and he's picking me up to take me to John Wayne Airport. And he feels more secure in that I had a rating too, and that Uber was vouching for my safety, for the fact that I was safe and a reliable and a courteous and honest passenger as well. So it goes both ways. Both rider and driver get to feel safe and secure through Uber's security mechanisms.
And the fact that you can give feedback both to the driver and I think that the driver can feedback on the passengers, I think can be important as well, because a lot of times people are not so civil to cab drivers, and cab drivers aren't always so nice to their passengers as well, right? We can sort of address that problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's many times I travel a lot to academic conferences and whatnot, and there's lots of times that taxi cab drivers that are certified and licensed by the city take me on a long route and overcharge me. They're rude, they take me to the wrong place, they're late in picking me up. And you can find lots of cases of taxi cab drivers that have had drugs in their on themselves or in their vehicle. They've hurt passengers and just been haven't been very polite and courteous to those passengers.
It would seem like this Uber gives a way to help weed out some of the less polite, both drivers and riders, right?
Right, which essentially makes it very safe and which makes consumers very ready to use it.
Now, we've talked about, I mentioned in the intro that Uber, even though it's seemingly helping people share stuff, helping people earn extra income, helping people who need rides get rides, it's generated a tremendous amount of hostility or response or reaction, both locally within Alabama and then even internationally. Why don't we start with the local reaction, because this is one of the things you guys weighed in on with your op-ed, right? We've heard about communities trying to prevent Uber from coming into their community. How exactly would they go about doing that? Because it sounds like if you're using an app on your phone. Like if I wanted to order something, if I wanted to order some food to go at a restaurant or something, and I'm just using an app, it wouldn't seem clear to me how like the local city could have much to say about what I'm doing there. So how do cities go about, or what's been the mechanism that they've been tripping up on in terms of trying to keep Uber out, or the contention over whether Uber should be allowed to enter different cities?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so several cities across Alabama have prevented Uber from operating by requiring commercial licenses, by requiring commercial insurance, and even by trying to increase regulation on Uber drivers. Uber drivers are driving their own personal vehicle. They have personal automobile insurance. So requiring additional licenses and additional fees and additional insurance on top of that undermines Uber's competitive model. They can't compete if all these additional costs are imposed on them. So these cities aren't paving the way. However, across Alabama, there are cities that are making the way for Uber and Lyft. Those cities include Mobile, Montgomery, and Huntsville. They've actually gone out of their way to say, you know what, Uber is a great model. It's the sharing economy model is the wave of the future, and we're going to see a lot more employment in these types of sectors going forward. So we need to remove the regulation that's impeding their operation in our cities.
So who's been trying to, I guess, keep Uber out of some of these different cities where the controversies erupted?
It's mainly city officials who don't necessarily understand how the system works, or fear that they could be liable as a city if something happens, if something went wrong with an Uber driver in their city.
And they're often beholden to special interest groups such as the taxi cab industry that has for so long held essentially a cartel in a lot of these cities, kept prices high, been less responsive to consumer demands. Well, now they're facing this competition and they don't like it. So they're going to city council to say, make sure this regulation is not removed, increase the regulation, whatever it takes, don't let Uber operate in this city.
So if Uber's in some sense substituting for taxi drivers, I mean, the original rationale for regulating taxi drivers was that this was taxis were a market where maybe the reputation wouldn't necessarily work very well, because for our, when we look at the industries where reputation works very well, it's the kind of product that people will use over and over again. So a business is worried about repeat customers, and if you're traveling, like Dan, like you were saying, like if you're traveling, if you're just out to Orange County very infrequently, then the taxi company isn't going to be worrying about whether they get your business again in the future. So I mean, it seems like this could be a market where reputation wasn't going to work very well, and I think that was behind some of the original rationale for saying, like, well, we need to have the government step in and make sure that since the market's not going to work so well here, that we can have a mechanism in place. So how does Uber address this, some of these weaknesses or perceived weaknesses of the taxi market?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty clear that the taxi cab model has failed to alleviate those concerns for safety and those concerns for fostering reputation. I won't go back to, if I was taking a taxi in Orange County, California, I probably won't go back there either. So the taxi cab company itself, given that it has a cartel and essentially no competition, isn't concerned for giving me a high quality ride, showing up on time, and being courteous to me, or charging me a reasonable price. Uber addresses these concerns by allowing consumers to have that immediate feedback mechanism and to have that choice. They can actually choose which driver they end up calling to come to pick them up. And if there's a driver with a rating less than what they like, they can just pass over that rider. And they're ensured that drivers have the incentive to be courteous and kind, because if your driver isn't, if they show up late, or if the car is dirty, they stop and get some fast food on the way, you can rate them and show that and express your concerns about that driver to other riders, future users of Uber, and therefore increase the overall quality of the ride-sharing services.
Now, one thing you mentioned with the commercial insurance, if Uber drivers don't have this commercial insurance, or don't have which costs more, but presumably might cover more, I mean, is this not a problem then for drivers? I mean, are you adequately protected, insured, and so forth with just the person's regular insurance versus, say, like the type of insurance that a taxi company would have?
Right. So 50% of Uber drivers drive less than 16 hours a week. So this is definitely a supplemental income. This isn't necessarily individuals who are driving Ubers. Cars do not actually do this for their main income. So that's a really big important factor when you're looking into that commercial insurance, because if you added that commercial insurance to them, then that would pretty much, all of those people would not be able to drive Uber cars because of the price. The barriers to entry would exceed the benefit of driving.
Yeah, and certainly Uber goes out of their way to ensure they require a safety inspection of every Uber vehicle. So they ensure the vehicle's safe. It's a newer model, it has 4 doors, not just 2 doors. And they also mandate a specific level of insurance, enough to adequately meet the needs of an Uber driver driving their own personal vehicle. So very much as Olivia said, it's drivers driving part-time. In fact, the person that picked me up in Orange County, California, was a worker getting off of Walmart after the late shift. And he said, yeah, usually I just turn on the app when I'm going home and pick someone up while I'm going home anyways. So it's a great way for people to drive those personal vehicles that are safe, reliable, and insured, and share that ride with other people in need of a lift.
It seems good if taxi companies face all of these regulations and they happen to be costly, but then Uber is able to come in and avoid having to undertake some of those costly regulations. I mean, some people might be concerned or object that this is not a level or even playing field, that Uber drivers, because they're getting around the regulations, are somehow have an advantage. If we were concerned about the unequal playing field, could we just maybe relax taxi regulations, or could that be a way to address a level playing field complaint?
I definitely think that taxi regulations are really excessive right now. And I think that with Uber coming in and showing how easy it is to have a successful business without regulations shows that taxi drivers and taxi companies should be a little more deregulated.
And not even add on, taxi cabs have been exploiting consumers with these regulations by having that cartel for decades, right? This new technology is going to enable we're going to be able to overthrow that type of exploitation. So yeah, overall we can hopefully see the taxi cab industry go away ultimately by deregulating it and having everything transition to the sharing economy model.
And then I guess there would still be the possibility if somebody wanted to be like an Uber driver full time, they wouldn't have to just be somebody driving on their odd hours or extra hours, right? Now, it sounds like from what you were talking about that in addition, if you're going to make rides more available and perhaps less expensive, that could Uber could have a big effect on drunk driving, because I mean that's one of the big, certainly been a big policy concern in our nation for decades, and probably the availability of taxi cabs is affecting whether people try to drive or not, right? So is there any link here?
Definitely. In California, there was actually a study that showed that drunk driving and drunk driver accidents went down between 3 and 5% during the last year because of Uber and their accessibility to consumers.
And I think here was another, and I thought this one was particularly interesting because it was showing the taxi ride requests and then the number of taxi rides completed, and how is it at midnight there that time, so you see like the spike in taxi requests, but actually the number of taxi rides completed is going down, right? So the taxis weren't responding to this demand.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's very unfortunate. As you can see, most of these drunk driving accidents are going to occur after taxi cabs quit operating, or largely quit operating at the end of the day when bars close. So providing a safe alternative, and I have to stress stay safe here, because oftentimes the people going out to bars, they have had a little to drink, they need a safe, reliable way to get home, and Uber provides that, meets that need through their app. So it has substantially decreased drunk driving accidents wherever we've measured these with empirical studies.
And it sounds like, again, yet another tremendous benefit here of this sharing potential. Now, there's been, even more recently, yet another element of this puzzle that's raised had to do with a decision out in California about how the state of California was going to address people who are, or consider people who are working for Uber. Could you tell us a little bit about this issue? Because it has to do something about like whether somebody's going to be an employee or a contractor.
Right.
How is that relevant?
So there's a big difference between an employee and a contractor, and a lot of that has to do with taxes. So if you're an independent contractor, you do fill out the 1099, and for the employee, the W-2. So a lot of that has to do with taxes. If you're an independent contractor, the company, so in this case Uber, would not pay any of the cost of the car, gas, mileage, anything like that. And Uber stands on the stance that it is just a neutral technological platform that connects drivers to consumers. And that is what they've stood on. Out in California, they just recently ruled that they should be considered employees. And that would change the whole identity of Uber, basically eliminating a lot of the perks that Uber drivers and consumers will have at this current day.
So then what again would be those perks with regard to, and how are they specifically tied to this idea that, well, they can have it if they're an independent contractor, but not if an employee?
Yeah, so as Olivia mentioned, the majority of Uber drivers or Lyft drivers work part-time for Uber or Lyft. It's just a side job compared to what they normally do. Some of them are full-time students, some of them are full-time parents, some of them have full-time jobs such as working at Walmart, Home Depot, things of that nature. So they're already getting health insurance, they're already getting benefits through that primary employment or through a spouse. So the requirement that Uber provides those types of benefits is only going to reduce their ultimate the amount of money that they're paid and increase the cost to consumers. So it really undermines Uber's very successful and low cost contracting method, where they contract personal drivers driving their own automobiles, and they get to deduct the costs and expenses of operating those vehicles on their own personal tax statements, rather than having Uber themselves have to manage and control all of that. It's just going to tremendously increase the cost of doing business for Uber, and unfortunately undermine Uber's very successful model that has been proved to be very helpful and beneficial to consumers.
And it seems like it would be particularly hard on the folks who, as you mentioned, wanting to just drive a few hours when it's convenient for them to be able to take them, or when there's high demand, or when I assume that if a driver can look on and see that, like, oh, this Friday night it looks like it's going to be a surge period, I'll plan to not go out, I'll plan to make sure I'm available to drive. And so it would seem like that the flexibility is particularly really relevant here in sharing contacts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so let me give you two personal anecdotes. One is a news story that a player for the Miami Dolphins, player that wasn't expected to meet the ultimate roster, but still a player nonetheless, ended up driving Uber in Miami part-time to meet expenses in between practices. So it provided flexibility, he could earn some money on the side, sock it away, saving for the future. The other anecdote is a personal story. Another ride that when I was in Orange County, California, was with a woman that was a parent, and I was talking to her about why she chose to do Uber, and that was her only occupation was being an Uber driver, but it's just part-time. And she said it was the flexibility that mattered the most. The flexibility to be there to drop her kids off at school, pick them up from school, to be there if she got a call from school and they were sick or had to go to the doctor, or have a class field trip, whatever. She wanted to be there for her kids, but she needed to have a little extra income. And it was Uber's contracting model that allowed her that flexibility in employment. If Uber is forced to go to an employee type situation where they're actually Uber employees, they won't be able to afford to have a driver for 4 or 5 hours a week. Mm-hmm. They're going to have drivers that are there at least part-time, 20 hours a week, maybe even full-time on set hours. So it's inconvenient for both the employer and the employees.
And so You know, you mentioned that flexibility. So the mom who's driving as an Uber driver, if she gets a call or text message that her children are sick, she needs to go to it. She basically just doesn't respond to any calls, or like what, disconnects and says I'm no longer available. Is it that it's as simple as that?
Simple.
And then if she's got some extra time, you can make yourself available.
Yeah, you are your own boss when it comes to Uber. Whenever you become an Uber driver, you sign on the app, go through the safety inspections, and you literally just press a button, say I'm available for rides, and then you press it to click it off when you're done. So it's very convenient and flexible, especially for the people in those types of situations where they need that flexibility and prefer that flexibility over a traditional employment model.
And that would seem like it's particularly important, because I mean, we've had, like, in effect, extra bedrooms or idle apartments and extra cars sitting around that aren't being used right now. The resources that the sharing economy are putting to use, I mean, they've been around for a long time, but it's just been a matter of transactions cost, the cost of actually trying to put somebody who needs the thing right now in touch with the person who has it, and who maybe doesn't need, is going to be out of town for a week and could make their apartment available as a Airbnb hotel room, in effect, for just a few days. And it really sounds like what you're suggesting here with having to go to the employee model is going to just completely offset the low transactions cost you really need to get the sharing economy going, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for instance, take my case, for example. I have 2 extra bedrooms in my house. We live in a small community, Troy, Alabama. Whenever there's a game day, there's a lot of people coming to town. There's not that many hotel rooms. In fact, they fill up pretty quickly, especially homecoming weekend. Or something like the Alabama Political Science Association. They're coming to Troy in the spring to meet here in Troy, Alabama. Will there be enough space available? Well, there's plenty of people throughout the community like myself with extra bedrooms, nice, all done, reliable, safe, secure. Airbnb would allow me, as a contractor, to provide 1 or 2 of those rooms and make them available to those people in need of shelter. If it was required that I was an employee of Airbnb to do that, there's no way I could take the time to do that part-time or even full-time in addition to my already full-time job. Mm-hmm. So that flexibility is vital for the continued success of the sharing economy. And as you mentioned, the potentials for the sharing economy are endless. There's potential for, if you're going out of town, let someone else with a dog nearby you take care of your dog as well. It can just expand beyond what we can imagine right now to sharing of resources that are currently underutilized because people don't have an easy and effective, reliable way to find people that need them and rent them out.
I mean, just think of all the books we have sitting out on the shelves of our houses at home. We could be library. Certainly, many of us could probably be lending libraries, or with I guess DVDs or whatever you have that you're not using. But it sounds pretty exciting, pretty amazing. But it also, as you mentioned, it seems like there are a lot of policy issues that are arising. Hopefully, we'll be able to chart a course that doesn't lead to too much regulation or too many government-imposed costs preventing these sharing economy gains from occurring. Well, thanks very much for having me on, and Olivia especially. It was a pleasure having you on this show. Thanks very much for coming on. And thank you for joining us. Join us again next time for another EconVersations.